State of Belief Radio is a production of Interfaith Alliance. I'm Welton Gaddy. I hope you've had a chance to hear our interview with Jeff Sharlet, whose latest two books explore the potentially bloody impact fundamentalist leaders in the U.S. have had on a distant African nation. The interview is available on the archive section of our website, but in addition to the dispassionate coverage a journalist brings to a story such as this one, there is the personal side that deserves to be addressed. That's why I'm so pleased to welcome to the studio Reverend Joseph Tolton, pastor of Rehoboth Temple in New York City and a longtime human rights activist. Earlier this year, Pastor Tolton traveled to Uganda, and he has seen the current climate there. Also with us is Bishop Christopher Sunyonjo, who led the Anglican Diocese of Western Uganda from 1974 to 1998. After retirement, he started a family counseling center and was eventually expelled from his church for refusing to condemn some of his clients. And we're also joined by Frank Mugisha, Executive Director of Sexual Minorities of Uganda. Friends, we've got the primary voices of this story right here in this studio. Well, let me begin with Reverend Joseph Tolton, yes, who is a pastor of Rehoboth Church here in New York City.
Yes.
Reverend Tolton, thanks for being with us on State of Belief.
It's wonderful to be with you. Thank you for the invitation.
I guess I want to begin. I know that you went to Uganda, and I want to talk about that, but I want to begin with why you went. And of particular interest to people who listen to State of Belief Radio is the intrusion of Western political and religious leaders into the lawmaking process of another country. Now, let me just ask first, how overt is that involvement?
The involvement of the religious right of this country is remarkably overt. You've had several evangelists throughout 2008 visit Uganda and actually make presentations to the parliament, from Rick Warren to Don Shamir to Scott Lively. They were bold in their presentations. These were not underground meetings. These were meetings that are well documented. So their trips left a lasting impression, and particularly Scott Lively, you can actually hear the echo of the language from his book, The Gay Swastika. You can hear that language in the Bahati Bill.
Were they invited there, or was it more like God told us to come and so here we are?
I think they'd probably answer yes to both of those questions. But the connection of the family, this secret organization that's housed at C Street, I believe,
right,
which Jeff Sharlet has written lots about, has an international purview. And so there are people in the Ugandan parliament who are members of the family. So they've been connected for years. So I think on a lot of levels, this meeting was the result of work that they've been doing for quite some time around how is it that the Ugandan society can be a society where God's law is imposed as the civil law.
Yeah. I know that our listeners will probably be more familiar with Rick Warren's name, yes, than the other two names. Does this mean that Rick Warren has a relationship with the family at C Street as well?
He absolutely has a relationship with the family at C Street. And beyond that, he has a very close and personal relationship with President Museveni's wife. And that is also very, very, very well documented as well.
So you wanted to go to Uganda. Why?
As a little boy, I remember very well being raised by my mother and my grandmother. My mother was a nurse, but she was very ill and therefore couldn't work. And my grandmother was retired. So we were raised on public assistance, on welfare. And I remember us watching programs like the PTL program with Jim and Tammy Baker. Mm-hmm. And although we were very poor, living in Harlem in a tenement, my mom would find nickels and dimes to put together to give to them. And as a child, I remember thinking, why is it that their concern for black people is only brought to bear when they want to send money to Africa, but they jump over communities like Southeast, Harlem, and Watts, and South Chicago, and are able to see the plight of Africans, but have no interest in the plight of African Americans? I have always been extremely aware of the racism that is in the DNA of the Christian right. And so as an out and openly gay man of faith who is African American, when this issue found its way across my desk, it's one that arrested my attention because I saw it as an extension of the religious rights racism. For years, they have pit the gay community against the black community. They did it with Proposition 8 in California. They did it in the 2004 election in the state of Ohio. And now the landscape is global as opposed to domestic, and they're doing it again in Uganda. And I think it's important that we connect those dots.
So did you hear about this from Uganda or from the States or from both at the same time? Where did you learn it?
I honestly learned about the issue watching Rachel Maddow, as I'm sure many of us did, because she was one of the reporters who certainly first broke the story.
Right.
And I was obviously intrigued by the story. I didn't realize, obviously, at that point that I'd have this level of involvement. But
so what did you learn on the trip to Uganda?
Absolutely. Well, I learned one, that every African American needs to take an inverse passage to really, I think, find their own sense of their place in the world. That's one thing that I learned. What I learned beyond that is that the LGBT community on the ground in Uganda has had a fantastic response to this issue. They taught me what courage was all about. Bahati thought that he was going to fracture the LGBT community. But what happened was the Bahati bill overreached. And because it overreached and had so many intrusions on broader human rights, the progressive community, for the first time, which had had a blind spot in Uganda on the LGBT issue, those fighting for immigrants' rights and the rights of workers and the rights of women, did not have the LGBT issue on their radar screen. This forced them to not only consider the LGBT issue, but to embrace it and to weave it into the issues that the Progressive Coalition fights for in Uganda. So Bahati actually took the LGBT community and connected it with a broader community when that was not his intention, ironically.
So did the resistance to the Bahati legislation come out of the churches?
By no means. It came out of local community-based organizations that are grassroots organizations doing work on the ground as it relates to the fostering of progressive values. Those interested in women's rights, the rights of immigrants, because of course with the issues in the Congo and Somalia, there are lots of immigrants in Uganda. Those that are very much so fighting for the rights of women who are raising orphans and housing orphans. That coalition became connected to the LGBT coalition, and together there was tremendous internal pressure and pushback against the bill.
So were the churches in Uganda more where the visitors from America were?
Yes, there's no question that the Church of Uganda, the Anglican Communion there, which is the dominant church, is extraordinarily conservative. And they have been out in front and very supportive of this, to some degree, supportive of Africa being a place where people who are gay or lesbian have no human rights. The independent Pentecostal churches have been the ones who've taken it further, who've actually partnered with Bahati and have actually kind of given him a spiritual home, as it were, and a home for this anti-gay legislation.
Okay, one more question here. In December of 2010, where is that situation right now?
The elections are happening now, and because the elections are happening, the bill is on the back burner. So over the last 3 or 4 months, we've had a little bit of a window to do some strategic planning to further push back against the bill. We understand that the bill will probably be reintroduced sometime in February. Our thought is that the bill is going to take out the death penalty and life in prison as the punishment for being gay or being caught in a gay act, and that the promotion of homosexuality will become illegal, that's what they're going to push for, therefore threatening every activist with being in prison within 24 hours of the bill passing.
Pastor Tolton, this is staggering
news.
Yes. And sad for the church, sad for Uganda. And I have to say it makes me angry at what's going on within the religious right in our country.